history of this magnificent instrument here, because it's Black History Month, and I was thinking about history and about stories and about narratives and who gets to tell stories and who gets to be in stories, and lots of different things about history. And the creation story of this is quite an interesting and beautiful story. So I'm going to go over 5 minutes, but I have permission to do so. So this is called a Balafon, and I'm just going to play it a little tiny bit. So this instrument is very, very, very old. So you have to go back in time, long ago and far away, to a world that's really different from the kind of world that we're living in today. So we're talking about the 13th century, early kind of 14th century, and we're also talking about an area of the world that we now call West Africa. So a long time before the horrors of slavery, a long time before colonialism, a long time before Western white guys built ships and got in them and then got out of them again and went, oh, look, we found a country, we'll have that. So a long time before all of those things happened, in an area where there are now countries that have been created by drawing lines on maps. So we're talking about Guinea, Mali, Senegal, the Gambia, Guinea-Bissau, Ivory Coast, Ghana, those kind of areas. And times were not that great, but people were just getting on with being people. And there was a ruler called Sumanguru, and he was displaced by another ruler called Sunjata Keita. Now, there are lots and lots of stories about Sunjata Keita. You can look them up yourself. It's often called the Lion King. And the stories about Sunjata are a bit similar to the kind of Western stories about Arthur, that he was a king who brought peace to the kingdom. And there was many battles between him and Sumanguru, which ended in a magical duel where one person transformed into something and another person transformed into something, and Sumanguru transformed into a bird, and then Sunjata transformed into a lion, and this went on and on and on until eventually Sumanguru transformed into a bird, a Senegal kuka, which is a bit like a Western cuckoo but bigger. And he flew off into the bush crying for his lost lands. And to this day, you can hear him crying, and I know that's true because I've been in Senegal and I've heard that bird crying and crying in the bush, so you know that he's still there crying for his lost lands. So Sunjata Keita became the Mansa, became the king of the area. And kings, of course, need to have musicians. And he had many, many, many musicians. But in his mind, he could hear this sound. And it wasn't the sound of any instrument that he possessed. It wasn't the sound of any musician that he knew. And he could hear it in his mind. And he kept wondering what it was. And one day, he was walking, and he could hear that sound. And he suddenly realised that it wasn't in his head, that he could actually hear it. So he followed the direction of the sound. And if you've ever been out in the bush and listening to music, you'll know it's really, really difficult to actually locate where the sound is coming from. So he wandered about, and eventually came to a cave. And inside the cave was something that looked exactly like this. So inside the cave, there was this incredible thing, and he was completely entranced, and he really wanted to get close to it. But as you probably know, anything magical left in a cave is not going to be unprotected. So there was an eagle, there was a lion, and there was a jinnah. Every time he tried to get near Balafon, the eagle would swoop down, the lion would roar, or the jinnah would confuse him magically. So he turned around, he'd be outside, he suddenly wouldn't know what he was doing. And this went on and on and on. And he tried and tried and tried because he really wanted to get near Balafon, but he just could not. So he gave up and went home. And this went on several times. And then finally, one day, he persuaded the guardians of the Balafon that he could take it with him back to where he lived. So he went back to where he lived and took the Balafon back. And the guardians of it came with him. So he had the Balafon, but he still couldn't play it because nobody could get near it. And then one day, a musician came along, a musician with no instrument. And he was sitting talking to Sunjata, and he saw the Balafon, and he was utterly transfixed, and he tried really hard to go to it. And Sunjata said, no, you can't do that because, there are the guardians, you'll get attacked by the eagle, bitten by the lion, or the jinnah will cause magical confusion, you will have no idea what you're doing. But this man got up and went into the next room and played Balafon. And the eagle didn't attack him, the lion didn't try to bite him, and the jinnah did nothing at all. So this man became the very first Balafon player. And because of that, his name is lost to history. He was given the name Bala, so he became Balakante. And Balakante was the first of the griots, the first of the hereditary musicians who take care of this instrument, even to this day. And the knowledge of how to make it and how to play it is passed from parent to child through the generations, and is still so even now, although the world is open, and the griot musicians have now passed their knowledge of the ballad to other musicians. So that's how a white girl from Derby comes to play Balafon. Thank you.